Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Departing spirits have often been known to bid their loved ones goodbye, with the place and time they choose to do so sometimes quite surprising. Here, 3 Weird World viewers relate such goodbyes that have been meaningful to them. Final contact. In the cold winter of 1972, when Roxanne was just a 5-year-old girl and her brother a mere 2 years old, her family resided in a secluded Kentucky farmhouse where eerie experiences would soon unfold. One chilling February night, as they prepared for bed, the biting cold seeped through the walls, and the only source of warmth was a wood-burning stove in the living room. Roxanne and her brother shared a bed on one couch, while their parents slept on the sleeper sofa. As her dad tended to the fire, her mum went upstairs with a flashlight to retrieve some items. Her bedroom was enveloped in darkness, as the light bulb had blown, leaving her with no choice but to navigate through the dimly lit room. In a sudden moment of terror, Roxanne's mother rushed downstairs, her voice trembling with fear, exclaiming that she had seen a man upstairs. Her father, seizing a pistol for protection, raced upstairs to confront the intruder, only to find no sign of anyone. Perplexed, her mother eventually gathered herself and recounted her experience. She described an elderly woman sitting on the edge of their bed, her hair neatly tied in a bun, calmly observing her. The fear of the unknown overwhelmed her, prompting her flight downstairs. Roxanne's father could not explain the apparition, as he had seen nothing unusual. In the days following this strange encounter, Roxanne's mother received a letter from her aunt in Youngstown, Ohio, bearing heartbreaking news. Her grandmother had passed away on the very night of the incident. With no telephone in their remote farmhouse, communication from afar relied solely on letters. Roxanne's mother's grandmother was a devout Pentecostal woman who wore her hair in a bun, a style popular among the older women of her church. It dawned on the family that the woman her mother saw that night might well have been her grandmother, making a final visit before her passing. While the event brought solace, it also carried a touch of sorrow. As a young child, Roxanne could hardly comprehend the significance of the encounter, but the memory lingers in her mind. The incident taught her that some spirits might return to offer warnings or say their last goodbyes. And she points out that perhaps, just as we struggle to let go of those we love, they too find it challenging to release their attachment to us. Dad's farewell. Sophie wrote to us from the US regarding her dad, who died in 2008 from cancer. She explains that in actual fact it was more like he didn't respond well to the chemotherapy he received. She had just got back home from visiting her parents, and after a night of tossing and turning, she got a call from her mother telling her that her father was dying. Her mother said that she should come back straight away, and so Sophie had never woken up so quickly in her life. She reclosed her suitcase, which was full of dirty laundry, and hurried back out the door within the hour. Before she left, she contacted her brother-in-law, briefly telling him what was going on. While she hurried back to her parents' place, on the way there, her sister contacted her, asking her what was going on. Sophie explained to her what was happening, and her sister then told her that they were on their way there from London. Sophie remembers those anguished events, reaching the hospital and seeing her distressed mum with her dad in the ICU, when she grabbed Sophie's jacket and cried out, "How am I supposed to go on without him?" Sophie couldn't answer that as she looked at her dad, who was unconscious and on life support. When she had last visited them, he was an outpatient at the hospital, receiving chemotherapy, often going outside for a cigarette as he was a chain smoker. She says that by the way he was dressed, you'd never know he was a patient. Sophie went to have lunch with her aunt, after which they decided to go back to her parents' house to prepare for her sister's arrival. Then she received that call from her mum crying out that her dad had passed. At her parents' house, Sophie started cleaning, but her sister and brother-in-law arrived soon after that, and they returned to the hospital to support her mother. It was 1 year later, on Father's Day, that Sophie was asleep in bed when she had a dream that she was driving around a city. She saw a motorcyclist riding on his motorcycle, and he gestured for her to pull over. She found a large empty parking lot where she pulled over. The rider slowed down next to her, parked his motorcycle, and removed his helmet. He was Sophie's dad, only he looked young again. He was tall, skinny but solid, with a head full of reddish-brown hair, wearing a denim jacket with matching jeans and a white t-shirt underneath. He thanked Sophie for taking care of her mum and said that he could move on. He hugged Sophie, told her he was proud of her and that he loved her. After they were finished hugging, he got on his motorcycle, which, when she looked at it more closely, she realised was his favourite motorcycle. He asked Sophie to relay a message to everyone that he loved them all and that he misses them. Sophie then affirmed to him that she would pass the message on. Her dad put back on his helmet, once again looking like the strange motorcyclist. He put his motorcycle in gear and rode into a bright portal in the distance. Sophie says that he looked really cool, and she realised just how her mom had found him attractive. She woke up crying, picked up her laptop, and conveyed her dad's message to her sister. A parting tribute. Marcel is from Quebec province in Canada and was born in the late 1960s. She explains that, at that time, Quebec was nearing the end of a period which was the so-called Quiet Revolution. She states that this was a time when the Roman Catholics of the province had had enough of the omnipresence of the Church in all matters, in particular issues that were not relevant to its central purpose. In short, she says that she was raised in a time when the churches were quickly being abandoned by the general population, resulting in greatly reduced attendance figures. As with many children of her day, Marcel was a believer at a young age. Over time, as she met with the harsh reality of life and became filled with cynicism, she morphed into a doubtful, still attending Sunday believer, then into a full-on non-believer. She now believes more that human beings are more animal in nature than a creation of a God she never saw. Still, she has always been intrigued as to why people believe, and in some ways has envied them their faith in something outside of themselves. Her account begins in 1990 when she was working in a summer job as a student historian guide in a historical house. This is where she met a co-worker who was a native of Western Canada. This person was happy to learn French through her friendship with Marcel, as Marcel was likewise happy to improve her English. They had a lot of fun together that summer, and at some point the new friend invited Marcel to her parents' summer house in southern Quebec. This invitation Marcel will always be happy she accepted. At the summer house for the weekend, the friends used to stay outside a lot, often to smoke cigarettes while enjoying a cold drink. Marcel's friend's mother could not move around by herself due to an illness, so they would all stay on the large porch together for hours, chatting about all kinds of things. Her friend's mother, despite being afflicted by a degenerating illness, was full of life, a positive person and a staunch believer. The following year, Marcel again visited the family's summer house and again enjoyed hours of chatting with her friend's mum. Then events of her own life took over, years passed, and for some reason she lost contact with her friend and the family. Several years later, in 2008, a lot of change took place, including Marcel's move from Quebec to Ottawa, getting the job she had always wanted and building a career, amongst other things. She stresses that at that time her friend and her friend's parents were never in her mind and hadn't been for years, as she was busy with her life. Then one night in the late summer of 2008, Marcel had a strange dream. It was very quick and very intense. Her friend's mother came to her in a dream and just said goodbye. Marcel woke up in the middle of the night crying after having the dream, and try as she may, she could not understand it. She had read many stories of departing souls visiting for a last time, but being the skeptic that she is, she always thought that these were cases of coincidence or simply a trick of the mind. And thus it would have been for her that night, so she shrugged it off. On the next morning, which was a Saturday, the phone rang. It was Marcel's long-lost friend. Marcel was surprised and happy and asked her how life was going and so forth. Her friend said, I have something to tell you. Marcel fidgeted awkwardly, then told her, let me guess, it is about your mum. She passed away. Her friend was surprised and asked how she knew this. Marcel told her she came to me last night to say goodbye. Marcel was again crying as she wrote this experience down 15 years later and concluded her account by saying that for many people this would be enough to make them a believer. Although it was not enough for her, it definitely makes her wonder.